Y'all mentioned YouTube channel. Let's get into it, man. Let's get into the Word of God, Life and Spirit Study Bible. Get into Lamentations chapter 3, 4, and 5, and then get into this book that I've been reading about the Grace Conspiracy Theories, 30 Grace Conspiracy Theories. Get into number 26. But first, get into the Word of God first. Let's go into chapter 3, verse 1. And it reads, I am the man who has seen affliction by the rod of his wrath. In chapter 3, the afflicted people of Israel are portrayed as a human being who is under God's punishment, yet who has the hope of restoration. Such a person claims the truth that God's love and help will come to those who repent and continue to wait for the Lord. In verse number 8, it says, even when I call out or cry for help, he shuts out my prayer. He shuts out my prayer. For the ungodly, one of the terrible consequences of living in sin and immorality is that God refused to hear their prayers. Verse 21 to 33 says, yet this I call to mind, therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. You're new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for her. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It's good for a man to bear the yoke while he's young. Let him sit alone in his silence, for the Lord has laid it on him. Let him bury his face in the dust. There may be yet hope. There may yet be hope, but let him offer his cheek to one who would strike him, and let him be filled with disgrace. Men are not cast off by the Lord forever, though he brings grief, he will show compassion. So great is his unfailing love, for he does not willingly bring affliction. Read to the children of men. Let's get to the breakdown. Therefore, I have hope. Jeremiah wants the people to know that all is not lost. They may have hope for the following reasons. Number one, the Lord's anger lasts only a brief time, but his great love never ceases. God had not rejected Judah as his covenant people. He still had a purpose for them. But the Lord is good and merciful to those who wait for him in humility and repentance. Also, the Lord desires to have compassion on sufferers, and his chastisement has accomplished in his purpose. Bear the yoke, that means that God sometimes sends affliction to those who have rebelled against him in order to accomplish a beneficial and purifying work in their lives. Those undergoing such trials should confess their sin, plead for pardon, and trust the Lord for forgiveness and for restoration. Does not willingly bring affliction. That means God does not delight in punishing people for their sins, but what he does is he punishes because he has to maintain moral order in the world. God's ultimate hope is that his affliction will turn people back to him. Let's go to verse 40 and 41. And it reads, let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. Let us lift up our hearts and our hands to God in heaven and say, let us return to the Lord. That means that the prophet identifies the people in a spiritual examination that would lead them to return to the Lord, obey his word, exhibit a sincere change in their hearts. If they do this, God will hear them and redeem them. All right, so that's it for that. Let's look at the breakdown. I did the breakdown of that. So let's get into chapter 4, verse 1 through 12, 13, and 22. Let's get to it. How the gold has lost its luster. The fine gold become dull. Sacred gems are scattered at the head of every secret. How the precious sons of Zion, once worth their weight in gold, are now considered as pots of clay, the work of a potter's hands. Even jackals offer their breasts to nurse their young, but my people have become heartless, like ostriches in the desert, because of thirst in the infant's tongue. Sticks to the roof of his mouth. The children beg for bread, but no one gives it to them. Those who once ate delicacies are destitute in the streets. Those nurtured in purple now lie on ash heaps. The punishment of my people is greater than that of Sodom, which was overthrown in a moment, without a hand turned to help her. But their princes were brighter than snow, and whiter than milk. Their bodies were more ruddy than rubies, than appearances like sapphires. But now they are blacker than soup. They are not recognized in the streets. Their skin has shriveled on their bones and has become as dark dry as stick. Those killed by the sword are better off than those who die of famine. Racked with hunger, they waste away for lack of food from the field. With their own hands, compassionate women have cooked their children, became their food when people were destroyed. The Lord has given full vent to his wrath. He has poured out his fierce anger. He kindled a fire in Zion that consumed her foundations. Kings of the earth did not believe, nor did any of the world's people, that enemies and foes could enter the gates of Jerusalem. Gold became dark. Jeremiah compares Jerusalem glories before the siege with the present devastation under the people brought on as a result of God's punishment. All right, verse 13. Let's get into it, man. Let's get into it. But it happened because of the sins of the prophets and the iniquities of her priests, who shed within her the blood of the righteous. Sins of her prophets means that Judah's tragic condition was brought on by her own sins, of which Jeremiah lists two key categories. Number one, the corruption of those who claim to be spiritual leaders. And two, the people's trust in human and political alliances rather than in God. Verse 22, O daughter of Zion, your punishment will end. He will not prolong your exile, but, O daughter of Edom, he will punish your sin, expose your wickedness. Right, your punishment will end. Jeremiah prophesies that Judah's captivity would come to an end when God's purpose for affliction was achieved. Chapter 5. Chapter 5, verse 1 to 22, 2 to 18. Remember, O Lord, what has happened to us. Look, see our disgrace. Our inheritance has been turned over to aliens. Our homes to the foreigners. We have become orphans and fatherless. Our mothers like widows. We must buy the water we drink. Our wood can be had only at a price. Those who pursue us are at our heels. We are weary and find no rest. We submit to Egypt and Assyria to get enough bread. Our fathers sin and are no more. We bear their punishment. Slaves rule over us, and there is none to free us from their hands. We get our bread at the risk of our lives, preserved of the sword in the desert. Our skin is hot as an oven, furious from hunger. Women have been ravished in Zion, and virgins in the towns of Judah. Princes have been hung up by their hands. Elders are shown no respect. Young men play at the millstones, or stagger under loads of wood. The elders are gone from the city gate. The young men have stopped their music. Joy is gone from our hearts. Dancing has turned to mourning. The crown has fallen from our head. Woe to us, for we have sinned. Because of this, our hearts are faint. Because of these things, our eyes grow dim. For Mount Zion, which lies desolate, and jackals prowling over it. Joy, O Lord, reigns forever. The throne endures from generation to generation. Why do you always forget us? Why do you forsake us to so long? Restore us to yourself, O Lord, that we may return. You knew our days as of old, unless you have utterly rejected us. You are angry with us beyond measure. Let's get into it. Remember, the last chapter of Lamentation is an intercessory prayer in which Jeremiah acknowledged that even though God is responsible for Jerusalem's judgment and calamity, he would yet listen to their cry, accept their sincere confession of sin, respond in mercy and favor, turn our ever over to aliens. The author vividly describes the desperate physical and emotional condition of the exiles, the persecution and fear will come in experiences for them. Restore us to yourself. It means the book of Lamentations ends in a prayer that expresses hope for God's mercy. Teaches us to call on God in the worst of circumstances, even when we are under his chastising hand. All right, so I'm done with the book of Lamentations being Ezekiel tomorrow, chapters 1, 2, and 3. I could just get into the book of Lamentations. Let's get into this book that I started reading last week. This is about the 30 greatest sports conspiracy theories of all time. It's like a ranking. So we're gonna go to did UNLV throw the 1991 NCAA semifinal game versus Duke? Interesting question. This game was played a long time ago. Now, this game was just a classic game. Duke was building something that had Mike Krzyzewski, they was considered an underdog in this game. They had played on UNLV in 1990, got blown out. It was 103-73. It was like the biggest margin of victory ever in Final Four history. And they played again in 91, this time in the national semifinals. Now, Grant Hill obviously was on this team. It obviously was a different team. Now, they still had, as far as his addition is concerned, they still had obviously Christian Laettner and Bobby Hurley and guys like that, Thomas Hill, people like that. But this matchup was a big time ultimate matchup because they had to find a way to beat one of the greatest teams in the college game had ever seen the national semifinals. The Running Rebels of UNLV arrived at Indianapolis in 1991. Final Four as the overwhelming famous to repeat that had won a year before, had lost a game more than 13 months, had won 45 games, had won 34 games that season by an average margin of 27.3, scoring an average of 98.3 points in those victories. Running Rebels had returning stars like, the five stars like Larry Johnson, who was receiving all three National Player of the Year awards, whether it be the Naismith Award, the John Wooden Award, the Oscar Robertson Trophy Award. He had Stacey Augmon. They named Plastic Man. He was great on the defensive end. He was named the Henry Iva Corinthian Award. He was the nation's top defensive player for the third consecutive season. So they were confident, rightfully so, against Duke. After what they did to them a year ago, beating them by 30 points. So Duke in 91, they won 30 games, lost only 7. But the difference with the team, again, they had was Grant Hill. Obviously, Larry Johnson was doing his thing. He was dominant. He was a junior college transfer out of tiny Odessa College. Very powerful, athletic, physical style. Could dunk big time. He averaged 22.7 points per game, 11.2 rebounds per game, 6.2% from the field. Doing his thing. He was number one pick in the draft for the Hornets in Charlotte in 1991. Albany went to Atlanta. Greg Anthony went to the Knicks. George Ackles went to the Miami Heat. They were stacked. They were loaded. It's a loaded team. They have 18-0 in the Big West Conference. They beat, Michigan State during the regular season, Florida State, Arkansas. At the time was the nation's second best ranked team. And former Arkansas head coach Norman Richardson once said, years later, that bunch with Larry Johnson and Anderson Hunt just manhandled them. They were men playing with boys. I think UNLV is the best team ever seen. I'm not sure anyone else is even close. So he beat Montana 99-65. And they played Georgetown. Then with the Dikembe Mutombo and Alonzo Mourning, they beat them 62-54. They went against Seton Hall. They beat Utah 83-66. Then they beat Seton Hall 77-65 in the Western Regional Final in Seattle. Then they faced Duke Blue Devils, obviously Christian Laettner, Bobby Hurley. Grant Hill was a true freshman on this team. And UNLV lost to Duke, 79-77. Duke went on to win the national championship against Kansas. But the question is, did UNLV throw this game away? Did they shave any points, or was there gambling involved to throw this game? Then got the breakdown of the 2.5 minutes of the game where UNLV got sloppy. They got sloppy with their poor defense, or the final 2.5 minutes of the game can draw suspicion of a fix. 2:32 to go, UNLV center George Ackles tips in his own shot, capping a 6-0 Running Rebels run. UNLV was winning this game 76-71. And 2:15 to go, Bobby Hurley hit a 3-point shot with Greg Anthony having fouled out with 3:51 to go. So he cut the lead to 76-74 with 2:15 to go. Then UNLV's get called for a 45-second shot clock violation to the ball. Then Brian Davis was poorly guarded on the inbounds pass from half court. He's permitted to drive to the basket, drive baseline, and reaches the basket before he's finally encountered by Johnson. He fouls Davis and he sinks in a short layup. He completes the 3-point play and Duke goes up by 76. Then Stacey Augmon continues his miserable game by missing a short jumper in the lane. Augmon, who had averaged 16.5 points during the season, was held to 6 points, 3 for 10 shooting. 49 seconds, Larry Johnson, who's 13 points, was well below his season average, grabs the offensive rebounds fouled by Grant Hill. Johnson misses both free throws, but Duke is called for a lane violation. So Johnson had another chance. He converts the free throw 77-77. Then 15 seconds to go. Looking for a good shot, Duke takes 34 seconds off the clock before Thomas Hill takes and misses a short jump shot. And Leitner grabs the offensive rebound and is fouled by reserve for Everett Gray. And with 12 seconds to go, at the UNLV calls a timeout, Chris Leitner makes two free throws to make it a 77-79 lead, 77-79. So the score is 79-77. So with 12 seconds left, UNLV calls another timeout. Torkanian, Jerry Quintan draws the final play. Larry Johnson somehow ends up handling the ball on the wing and finds himself with open look at the basket from 3-point range. He passes up on a shot, skips a pass back to Anderson Hunt, throws up a desperate 3-point shot with time expiring. The shot bounces hard off the back of the iron, and Hurley grabs the rebound, and time expires, and Duke wins. Now, here's evidence that may support a conspiracy. If UNLV's poor performance down the stretch of the game wasn't enough to suggest the likelihood of a fix, A.D. Hopkins of the Las Vegas Review-Journal reported on May 26, 1991, that three UNLV players, Moses Scurry, Anderson Hunt, and David Butler, had been entertained at the home of Richie the Fixer Perry, twice convicted sports event fixer who had figured in both the fixing of harness races at the Roosevelt Yonkers racetracks in New York in 1974, point shaving scandal with Boston College in 78-79. At the time of the publication of the Review Journal article, Perry was under consideration by Nevada state gaming investigators for inclusion in the state's Black Book, list of an individual prohibited by law from entering Nevada casinos. So he's a key figure in this investigation the NCAA was doing with the basketball program that UNLV was dealing with, which had become a target during Turkanian's years in Las Vegas. So because of violations stemming from the improper recruitment of New York playground phenom Lloyd Daniels in '86, the Run Rebels had already been placed on probation, had been banned from postseason play in 1991-1992 before Hopkins' report was published. That's something that may lead to that, probably a possible conspiracy. There was a fix. So, make a long story short, for the evidence of the fix was revealed in February 1992, when the Las Vegas Review Journal reported that a federal investigation had been launched in an attempt to determine whether or not there would be shade points in games during the 1990-1991 season, including their lowest in the Final Four to Duke. The report also indicated that the authorities had inquired about surveillance tapes at Trump Plaza Hotel in Atlantic City that may contain visual evidence of Augmon associated with Perry shortly after the loss. Though he vehemently denied any involvement with Perry or any other gamblers, Kenyon resigned as head coach of the Running Rebels in March 1992, citing inability to recruit in the wake of the scandal. Now, here's the evidence against the conspiracy. The most compelling argument against the existence of a fixed game is that in 1991, before the rise of online sports books, there was no way to legally bet on the game because the law that prohibits the sports books of Nevada casinos from taking bets or posting lines on events or games involving Nevada teams. There was no official line on the semifinal game. Reports vary on the issue, but it is generally agreed that the legal line on the game was 6 or 7 points. Bookmakers in the UK, where sports gambling is legal, have never paid much attention to the NCAA basketball tournament. There is no evidence that the 1991 tournament marked an exception that left all of the action to illegal bookmaking operations, most of which are mob run, stuff like that. And so it made me seem like a candidate to shade points. Hunt was one of the three players pictured in the infamous hot tub photo. That argument falls apart when one takes a look at the game's box score It sees that Hunt led all scores that night with 29 points, knowing that likely with the catches he faced for crossing the mob, it is unlikely that Hunt, who shot 11 for 20 from the field, being 4 for 11 from behind the arc, that have been part of any fix. That's it, man. That's it at number 26 was Conspiracy. The argument be against the fix is the spectacle of the game. There have been many notable college basketball point shaving scandals like CCNY, Boston College, Arizona State, or Northwestern have occurred from far from the national spotlight, stuff like that. The fixed games are the ones that fixers don't think anyone's paying attention to because the game generally don't attract national interest. Really easy to shave points in the mid-January game between Northwestern and Iowa State. Iowa then one of the most watched college basketball games in history. A national television audience watching, national media analyzing irregularities and gameplay are much more likely to be noticed. Fusers aren't looking to attract that kind of attention. Stuff like that. That's it, man. That's the number 26 conspiracy theory. Did UNLV hold the 1991 NCAA semifinal game versus Duke? Tomorrow being chapter 25, talking about Olympic gold medalist in women's 100-meter as a secret. That's it for tonight. The Spirit Study Bible, I was done. Finish book of Lamentations, being Ezekiel tomorrow, chapter 1, 2, and 3, and chapter 25 about the 25th conspiracy theory. So thanks for those who tuning in. Until then, talk to you more.